This is Justin Ruiz for assignment 7 for CSC300. So first I'll just go ahead and go over the classes that are involved in this project. So first we have the abstract class from which users and organizations will inherit from. Both users and organizations will have a name and an updates array. This display updates method is a simple for loop that will print all updates easily when called. Then we have the user class. So users have certain properties unique to them, not seen in organizations, i.e. username, surname, password, date of birth, the friends list, and the following pages list. They also have a unique constructor for the creation of new users, an add friend function that will handle adding friends. Basically, this if function will check that the user isn't trying to add themselves or that the user is already on their list. Now, if that's the case, then it'll add this friend to the friends list and it'll add this user to the friends friend list. So friends are a two-way street in this network. For the add org function, it'll check that the user isn't already subscribed to this organization or page. Then it'll subscribe this person to the organization and it'll add this person to the organization's follow list. For organization, there are certain properties unique to them, not seen in users. This will be the integer randomized ID and the user array list of followers. This is just a placeholder constructor that contains a randomized ID and a randomized mission statement for the organization itself. Basically, it just takes from these random text string array that I've just randomly created and make one randomly from the constructor here, as we'll see in the creation later. Finally, we have the OSN class itself. This is just integral to handling all the user and organization data. So it has a array list of users for users, a string array list for the username list, a string array list for the password list, an organization array list for the organizations, and a string array list for the organization names. It also includes a display network method. This just gives a list of pages as well as possible login password combos for the user to log in at the beginning of the program. Now I'll go to the actual main and go through it as it will execute. I have a couple of final integer variables here. Just for the scope of this project, the number of users was 3, the number of organizations is 2, and as per the project, the maximum updates that a user can have is 3 as well. So now it'll create the OSN, then it'll initialize the OSN. So let's go ahead and go down to the initialize function here. Basically, this just uses the constructors of the classes to add predefined users and pages into the network. And this is technically hard-coded as well, because the user isn't inputting their own information themselves yet. Now that the OSN is completed being initialized, we'll just create a integer name selection, a Boolean logged in variable flag. We'll set it to false at first, and then we'll create the user index to -1, so we'll set it to invalid at first. Now for the actual do while loop, which will serve for the majority of the program itself. So if we're not logged in, which it'll start off as not logged in, the network will go ahead and display all the password combos and login combos as well as organization pages as per the display network function here. Then it'll go ahead and grab the index of the user in the network when the login is successful. And it'll do that using the login loop function, which we will jump to right now. So this will loop until successful login. Basically, we'll start off with the login success as false and do another do while loop here. It'll grab the user index from the login function, which we will go to right now. And in the login function, basically just prompts and validates the login credentials. So it'll ask the person for their username, but they can exit at any time by typing in exit for the username field. And then if they put in a username that's not exit, it'll ask them for their password. Now, it'll validate the credentials by checking if the username is valid and if the password inputted corresponds to the username inputted. Now, if that is all true, then it will return the index of the actual user themselves. So now that the index of the user has been put into the user index integer variable, it'll check if it's not invalid. So if it is invalid, then it'll tell us that it's invalid, and then it'll keep looping. It'll go back to the top, attempt to log in again. And so if it is valid, then we'll go ahead and hard code the friends and orgs into that user. So we'll go down here, and for the scope of this project, all users are connected to each other, and all users are following every organization page out there. So now we'll change the login success flag to true, and we'll return the user index. So now that logged in is true, this block of code will not be called again unless the user logs out, as we'll see later. So now we'll default the selection variable to 0, and we will show the user options to the user. So let's go ahead and go down to the user options. Basically, this just prompts and returns the selection integer to the main program. So if the user selects 1, it'll visit a friend. If the user selects 2, it'll visit the page. If the user selects 3, they'll post an update. If the user selects 4, they'll log out. And if the user selects 5, then it'll exit the program. So this will go ahead and return whatever the input is. Now it'll run the user options using the selection that was given in the show user options. So basically, as I said before, if the user selects 1, it'll go ahead and run the visit friend function. So in the visit friend function, it'll visit the friend and view their updates. It'll prompt the user the name of the friend they would like to visit, and if the name that they input is within the user's friend list and the name of the inputted name exists within the user network, it will go ahead and print out the updates using the display updates method under profile. Now, if one of those conditions is not met, then it'll simply print out a friend not found. So if the user inputs 2, it'll go ahead and run the visit page function. This is basically the same thing as the visit friend function, except instead of querying the network's user array list, it will query the network's page or organizations list, as well as the user's actual following pages. It'll cross-reference them. So now if the user made their selection 3, it will go into the post update method. Basically, this handles the updates post for the currently logged in user. So the first thing that this function will do is check first to make sure that the max updates hasn't been reached. For the scope of this project, the max updates is 3. So if the user does not have more than 3 updates, it will go ahead and run this block of code here. It'll prompt for the update, then make changes to the updates array for the user once the user has typed in their update. Now, if the user selects 4, that means they want to log out. This will simply print out a logout confirmation, and no matter what the user inputs, it will always return the selection. This is important because in the case of selection 4 or 5, this has a function in the main do-while loop that will log out and exit respectively. So 4 is log out and 5 is exit respectively. So now that the selection has been inputted from the run user options, if the selection was 4, it will go ahead and log out, set the flag to false, and start from the top here, because the while selection not equal 5 is true still. Then it'll run the login code again, and all of that will happen once more. Now, if the selection is equal to 5, that will end the program. Okay, now I'll go ahead and run the program just to demonstrate that it works. So first, the network will print out all the data in the actual network class itself. And I'll go ahead and do an invalid login here. And it'll give me an error. I'll go ahead and log into username 0, but I'll put in the wrong password. It'll give me an error. Now I'll use the actual correct credentials, and it'll proceed to the show me the options that I can do as a logged in user. So I can go ahead and visit a friend, and I'll go ahead and just type in invalid friend. It'll give me an error. Now I'll go ahead and visit an actual friend. Currently, they have no posts. Now I'll go ahead and visit a page. I'll go ahead and visit an invalid page, and it'll give me an error. Now I'll visit an actual page. Oh, I spelled that wrong. So it'll go ahead and show me the updates for that organization, which is a randomly generated string from the constructor. Now I'll go ahead and post my own update as username 0. Now I'll go ahead and log out. This time I'll log in as username 1. I'm going to go ahead and visit username 0. As we can see, it will display his updates. I'll go ahead and post 2 updates of my own. Now I'll go ahead and log out, log in as username 2, and visit username 1. There you can see both updates that he's posted. Now I'll go ahead and attempt to post more than 3 updates. As you can see, it'll prompt me that the maximum number of updates has been reached already. Now I'll go ahead and exit the program.